Hello folks, my name is Jay Soren and today I will be doing a guide on using Arma Reforger tools to do faction creation for Arma Reforger. We're going to be using the BI Studios provided tutorial guide, but I'm going to be deviating a bit in order to work on one of my own mod packs. I'm going to be using my 101st MilSim mod uniforms. The little thing I've put together and been experimenting with just so that I can learn, and I'm going to make factions using what I've put together so far. So if you we'll get into the prerequisites before starting this project in a second, and this whole video guide will be broken up into several parts. I'll try to do it kind of chapter by chapter, keep everything so they're not in too long of a segment. All right, so let's get started. All right, so to start out, in order to use Reforger tools, if you haven't seen any other videos, if you're not familiar with this, you need to buy Arma Reforger, and that has to be on PC. Arma Reforger tools is not available through the Xbox. So if you buy the game on Xbox, you won't have access to Arma Reforger tools. Now, so here we can see in the library I have tools. I believe you'll have to go to your drop down here in your library and click on tools if you're not seeing that already. Oh, Will T, thanks for giving the notice. I wrote this out and didn't update it. Nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by. All right, so to continue, we have the drop down here. You'll click on tools and then you'll be able to see the Arma Reforger tools. This comes with the game, like I said. All right, so we can go ahead and launch that and you will see the pop-up. This is our Infusion Workbench Launcher, which comes up. By now, if you're doing this tutorial, you should be familiar with this. So let's go and look at our guide that we're going to be using. So I'm gonna use Google Chrome, whatever search engine you want to use, or Internet Explorer you want to use. I just search in Google Arma Reforger BI Studio, and the Bohemia Interactive community website comes right up first thing, and I'm looking for this link, the Arma Reforger. I'll also put in this website's link into the video description. All right, so here we have everything on Arma Reforger, all the details. This is the community wiki. What we're looking for, we're going to scroll down to getting started. We're going to Arma Reforger modding. All right, so that opened up the new window, and now we have a bunch of the modding guides here. We have stuff on the general guidelines, official tools, and tutorials. We are going to tutorials. And again, this opens up into multiple different groups: the assets, game master, official tools, scenario, and scripting. And with the series of videos, we're going to be working on the assets. All right, so in the assets, I go over this in the beginning of each of my videos that deals with one of these tutorials. These are in order of difficulty, and these are the recommended order that you should go through these tutorials. So if you're jumping into the faction creation, I mean, hopefully with my video, you would be able to get through it, but it is highly recommended that you go through and attempt these other ones before doing this, because each of these tutorials builds on information provided in the previous tutorial. So with this faction creation, we're going to be going over and referencing info that you learned about in car modding, weapon modding, and the prefab basics, data modding basics as well. Anyways, so that brings us to our faction creation. This is what we're going to be using, so we'll open that up. All right, and we will jump right in. So faction creation, the goals of this tutorial. In this tutorial, you will learn about configuration of characters, preparation of unit groups, creation of new factions, integration of new faction into Game Master, integration of the new faction into a conflict game mode. All right, and there's a little info box here. This tutorial touches quite a lot of topics, and it is recommended you familiarize yourself with the modded weapon and modded car tutorials, just like I said. They give the same warning. So sources files for this tutorial can be found in Arma Reforger samples GitHub repository, and you can click on this link to get to their GitHub repository. I already, again, you can also just search it. So I have a window up already. We're going to be looking at, so I just typed in Arma Reforger GitHub and it comes up right away. This is the first link. This is what we're looking for. And the link on their website will take you to the same spot. So this has a ton of samples that you can use. It's provided by Bohemia Interactive to either reference like bones and structures for new models you're making, or to like see how to import and use anything that these guides reference, or they're saying like, okay, we're going to import this file, or you're going to put in this new thing. It's found here. So you can download this file and save it on your computer, and then pull anything you need from that. But for today's tutorial, we're going to be looking at this new faction, and you can see here it's broken down into all the parts you would need in order to do anything with Arma Reforger tools. We're going to look, and you can see in the prefabs our, let's see, our characters, and let's look at the footwear. All right, and now we have our, oh, hey DBO, thanks for following, man. I appreciate it. Turn my mic up. Yeah, I got you. How's that? Is that better? All right, so going back into where we were left off. So here you can see we have the, yeah, thanks man, I appreciate it. The different colors here. So we're going to reference this. We haven't gotten to this yet, but here we have combat boots, Soviet 01 item red. And that's referencing one of the ones that it's going to, the guide tells us to make a red faction. And like I said, we're not going to do the red faction. We're going to use my own uniform items that I've been putting together. But if you want to do exactly as the guide says, you can go and pull those from here. I'm also going to go over and show where you can go in and create these items yourself. So all they did with these is they changed the color of these boots. Hey man, no worries DVO. It's yeah, people get weird. They're kind of rude sometimes, but you know, we all help each other out. We'll make a good community. Anyways, yeah, so I'll jump ahead, show what I was talking about here. So here you can see these red boots. That's what I was referring to. So you can download this from the samples page. You don't have to make them yourselves. If you just like quickly want to get through this guide and try out exactly what they're saying, so you can familiarize with this setup, you can just download them. Or I will go through and point out where you go for the to edit those yourself. So say you want to make a new color, or you don't like the shade of red, you can, I'll show you where to go and what to do. Yeah, DVO, I get it. I was so one of the guys jumping in the chat. He's one of the people in the Arma Reforger Discord, which is a really great community. There's a lot of people in there that are really helpful. I will also link I'll put in a link to that Discord in the video description. And if you've watched my other videos, you may even have seen I go to this Discord whenever I get stuck, and I'll put a chat in there and be like, hey, I've tried out this thing, I'm stuck here, does anyone know what I'm doing wrong, kind of stuff. Or I even, well, before I even do that, I search through it and try to see if someone's already asked the same question as me. So so anyone dropping in, hey, thanks for the support, and I will link anything to that. I will make a link to that Discord. All right, so continuing on, let's see what I think I've gone over the basics for our introduction, what we're going to be doing. So let's jump into this introduction, see what our next part is. So in this tutorial, process of creating a new faction is explained as an example. Secrets are preparing. Sample faction red 4 will be unveiled. This page just goes through topics like preparing new characters, tweaking their configuration, creating new groups, preparing general faction configs, and finally integration into both in-game editor and conflict game mode. So this one does a lot. This is a really important tutorial. While the tutorial covers mostly process of creating faction out of already existing assets or textures of that content, same principles applies also to new content. So if you're bringing in your own models, if you're doing your own stuff, this stuff is still important. You're going to be doing these same functions, these same actions. You're going to be setting them up the same. Oh, dude, that's awesome. DBO, I'll have to pick your brain later because I never did much with Arma 3, and I'm jumping into all this for Arma Reforger. This is all new for me. So, dude, hit me up, send me a PM, and we'll work together a bit. I'm sure there's a ton I could learn from you. All right, so continuing on, let's see. Our new faction contains three new factions, and this tutorial describes only steps necessary to prepare sample faction red 4. Steps for blue 4 and green 4 factions are basically the same as the red 4 faction. All right, so like I pointed out, they have all this prepared. They did all the items and made the stuff so you could make these multiple colored factions if you wanted to. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to be using my 101st. Well, I'm going to be showing how I do my 101st MilSim mod uniforms, and I'm going to add them and make loadouts and a faction for that. And I'll go into more detail once we pull open the Reforger tools. All right, so if you're curious about how the files and everything gets structured, this little image shows everything in the files, how it's all structured, where everything goes, how the flow for those file structures and branches go. So I'm not going to go through all those. You can look at that yourself, or by now you should start to get an idea of how this is all structured. All right, character configuration, retexturing existing equipment. So we'll go through this. Again, I'm not going to do exactly what they did, but I will show you how I edited my stuff. So let's go into that. Let's go into our Infusion workbench. All right, so you can see I've already got a bunch of projects here. I've been working on this for a little bit. Okay, yeah, man, I definitely will. Thanks, man. Thanks for the support. All right, so you can see I already have these in, but if you haven't already made your factions, if you haven't made your PBO, or not PBO, I'm so sorry. If you haven't made your project, we can use this button to create new. And normally, if you're doing this tutorial, you don't need to base this on anything else right now. We can just make our new project, and that would be you can name it faction creation tutorial. You can make it the name of whatever you want your actual project to be or your mod to be. As you can see, I made mine my 101st MilSim factions. And what this dependencies list is all the things you can add into it. So like I said, for starting out, you don't need to add anything into this. You don't need any dependencies besides the Arma Reforger base game stuff, and this will always be checked. You can see it's grayed out. You can't edit it or remove it. That needs to be there for this all to work right. every mod or project you make in Fusion Workbench is going to be, yeah, I got it. I'm not sure either, but if you, sorry, TBO, if you want to send me something, you can also send it to me. Go ahead and send it to me on Discord. For the dependencies, when I made my faction, I made my dependencies on my vehicles mod, on my weapons mod, on my props, and my uniforms mod, because I want to bring those all in to my faction. But if you're doing this on your own or you're doing the tutorial, you don't need all that. So just keep that in mind. You would just name your project, hit OK, and continue from there. But I'm not doing that. I've already made this. So that's why I'm just clicking on my 101st MilSim factions and I'm opening it. All right, and here we go. So now we're in Fusion Workbench. This is our workbench view, our workbench window. We have a bunch of different windows that we can use in this. Again, you should have already seen these if you're attempting to make a faction, but there we have our world editor, particle, animation, script, all these different things. A lot of these I haven't used yet. I haven't messed with too much. Today, I think we're mostly going to be using the world editor, the actual workbench view, and maybe the particle editor, one of these, maybe audio or something like that. We might have to touch into that, but for the most part, I think we're just going to be using world editor and the workbench itself. All right, now to talk about the file structure, and I'm going to kind of talk about why I have split these up into different mods and why I made them dependent on my faction mod. So here you can see that the project we're working on now is my MilSim factions, and in my resource browser you can see my props files, which has nothing right now, my uniforms, which has assets, configs, and prefabs already, my vehicles, and my weapons, which also has nothing yet. And the reason I'm doing that is because I am eventually going to fill all these out. I am slowly building out my mod pack, and I want to learn how to bring in my own models for uniforms, vehicles, and weapons. I am going to start out with using base game items and making sure I'm organizing everything correctly. I have retextured a lot of these things. I will then be bringing in the sample weapons and uniforms and any items that BI has provided, just to make sure I know how that works before I go into building my own models in Blender, or maybe using sample models from Arma 2 or Arma 3 and bringing those into game. So when that's why I have all these here. Again, if you're going through this tutorial, you won't have all these, and that's okay, because everything you do is going to be from the base game files, or you'll import them from the GitHub repository. All right, so let's see where to start. Let's go back to our guide, and I'm going to do this a bunch. I'm going to be jumping back and forth. You can get all this info and read through this guide, but again, this is for people who want a little bit more insight. I will go over some things that might not be noted in here, and I know some people just prefer to watch videos. Again, I don't know everything. I'm not an expert. I'm doing this just as much to learn as I am to help other people out. So keep that in mind as we go through this. I make mistakes, so if I do make a mistake, you see something that isn't clear, shout it out in the comments. If you're watching the recorded stuff, please make comments. Let me know if something's outdated. Let me know if I make a mistake, because I will happily go and redo a segment to make sure that everything's accurate and people can get through this. All right, so creating retextures using prefab. Or let's see, is there anything in here I gotta? All right, so it goes in talking about how the equipment is a lot more complicated to retexture than our other weapons and vehicles were. There's a few more options and things you got to keep in mind. We're going to go through and point those out in this first section. I think after that, I will take a quick break and we'll break this up into another segment. But let's go through that first. All right, so creating retextures using prefabs. Creating prefabs for retextures is quite easy since process some grammatical errors in these guides still. So easily since the process is exactly the same as for regular items. Those new prefabs should be as simple as possible, and they can be created by simply dragging XLB model into World Editor viewport. As a result of that action, a new generic entity instance with mesh object component is created, and there assigned materials can be changed as on any other entity. Once assigned materials are adjusted, this entity can be transformed to prefab by grabbing it from the hierarchy list to the desired folder in resource browser window. All right, I said a bunch of stuff, so let's go look at what they're talking about. And we'll actually go find this Russian op4 boot, and I will show you what they're talking about. So we're going to the Arma Reforger, the base game files. Everyone will be able to see this no matter if you're doing your own mods or whatever. We're going to prefabs. Oh, what was it? Was it, yeah, it's on good. This one's going to be under character for the boots. So we're going to characters, footwear, and look at that. There's our, so we have the Soviet combat boots, Soviet 01, and our combat boots, US 01. So if you want to do exactly what the guide's doing, you can click on this combat boots Soviet 01, and we can edit the prefab. All right, so I clicked on the edit the prefab. I don't want to save anything in here right now. We're just looking at this to look at the layout. So you got your mesh object, which just like in the weapons mod and the car modding tutorial, we went here to change our materials and make some funky stuff happen. Now don't do this. I'm going to show you. I'm going to put in some random stuff. All right, I'm going to put in a random material that is a different color, and you'll notice nothing happens. Nothing changed here. I'm not going to save this. This is for one of the yeah, that's one of the material files for the car. But the point is, nothing changed. To change the displayed item, you need to go. There are overrides. So you use the material overrides in order to change uniform items textures. So if I wanted to change this texture, don't ask me why. I don't know why it's set up that way, but so right now we are looking at the worn, or we're looking at the item model. So this is if you drop these boots on the ground, say you took them off your character and you drop them off on the ground in the game, this is what it shows. Now if you wanted to see what the worn model looks like, there is a handy little checkbox for that here somewhere. Oh, here it is. So debug worn model. So you go to base loadout cloth component under your object properties, base loadout cloth component, and we go down to here. You see these the model. We see our model files here, our XOB files, and down below that is a line that says debug worn model, and I'm going to check that and look at it. Split that up. Now we're looking at the model for the worn model. So this is what it looks like when your character's wearing it and they're standing still. All right, so in order to, and now I can swap that back. So to demonstrate what I was talking about, whether I want to change the texture here, I need to do a materials override. So I keep this, I'm not changing the XLB file. You'll see down below this, there's a worn materials override button, and I want to click, it says 0 right now, I want to add an element. So I do the little check mark to add an element, and now it has one. There's nothing in the line, and I got a little double dot option and an open file blank option. So let's go ahead and pick a random material to show how this changes. All right, I made these earlier. I'm just grabbing a random one from one of my vehicles. And you can see that that one now changes. It's kind of messed up because this isn't meant for this, but I'm not going to save this. I'm just demonstrating. So that is how I would change this material, the texture for these boots. I don't do it in the mesh object like you would expect. It's going to be in our base loadout cloth component. All right, I'm going to exit this out. I'm exiting out of the world editor because I don't want to save this. I'm going to select no. We were just doing that for demonstration. Look at it, that's going frickin' crazy. And let's exit this out so I don't accidentally save anything. I don't want to save that. And let's launch this back. All right, so going back to my MilSim factions, that's what I named mine. Opening that back up. And look at, we're back to our boots. It's back as normal. I didn't save anything or change it. But yeah, so if you want to mess with this, if you want to change your stuff around, if you want to make a new color or do anything for that, you can do that here. You can go through to whatever item, uniform item you want to change, find it, and then do the overrides with the texture you want to bring in. If you want more detail than that, I'm not going to go into that right now. If you want to see another separate stuff on how to mess with those things, you know, make a comment in the video, and if I have enough people that are interested in that, maybe I'll do something later. Anyways, I've already done all this work. We can see in my uniforms mod, I have some prefabs. So what I did was I made a new, I didn't make a new model. So I used the model for the US combat boots. And you see it, combat boots US. Oh, and I named this 506. That should be 101st, but I guess ignore that for now. So this is my mod for the 101st faction mod, or 101st uniform mods. I retextured this boot and using the base game model. And I thought this came out pretty good. So I'm happy with this. I'm going to use this for a while until I bring in my own new models. All right, so that's what we're going to be using. Let's go back to our tutorial. All right, so we went over how to do the materials override. Let's see if there's anything from here that I should point out to you. All this stuff about how to drop stuff into the world editor, there's a bunch of different ways how you can manipulate Reforger tools, how you can add stuff. You can click and drag it. You can what I just showed you, how I've been doing stuff in all my videos, I mean, that's totally fine. There's other ways to do it, and you wouldn't be wrong to do it that way. But there are also wrong ways to do it. Like, you know, be careful if you're duplicating an item, if you're duplicating it to your project folder, if you are inheriting it. Inheriting is different, and again, at a later time, I'll go over that. If you don't know it, you'll want to look up those differences. All right, creating retextures using overrides. We already did that. All right, these steps need to be performed to the worn and item models. That's a good point. And I think I touched on that, but I do want to be clear on that. We'll go to my profile. So you'll notice if I go to so we're in my combat boots US 01 titled 506, but this is part of my 101st mod. We go to the base loadout cloth component, and you can see here that we have the combat boots model file here for the worn model, and then we have the item model here, and they show up as the black boots because that's how the base game stuff is. And I just have my texture, my materials and texture file overriding that. And if I hit the debug worn model, you can see that that's applied to my worn model too. Now if I was to, so if you want to reset to the default value of one of any of these, you can hit this little back arrow here. So that's going to remove it. Now if I hit when I hit my debug worn model, you're going to see that it goes back to the black normal combat boot. See, and that brings it back to the back normal combat boot. So I'm going to, you have to make sure you do both of these. All right, I'm going to search. I know what my boot's titled, so I'm just searching that material again, the combat boot. Okay, and now we're back. I'm going to undo this worn model because I don't want that to show up all the time. I like to leave it how it was originally. And if I go to my mesh object, you can see that I didn't change the material in my mesh object. It's still the normal base one. That's because it doesn't matter. If I'm overriding someone else's model or prefabs, it's not, or the base game prefab, this won't change anything. I'm just going to leave it. Don't bother messing with this. It's not going to make a difference. All right, so back to our guide. All right, and then creating new character prefabs. So this is on to the next chapter. I quickly went over creating retextures and overrides. This is almost the same as the other stuff. The big takeaway is to note that with worn objects, you have to use the override rather than changing the material in the mesh object. So again, worn materials, go to the base loadout cloth component, and you're looking for these material overrides. All right, and that is enough to wrap that up. Now you'll be able to go through and change the colors of items that are in the base game, or you know how to put in your new textures, new materials. Let's take a quick pause. When we come back, we will be creating a new character prefabs. All right, so I'm Jay Soren. Thanks for tuning into this segment. I will be back shortly, and you can, if this is on YouTube, the next video in this playlist will be popping up in the link provided. All right, so thanks for stopping by.